need somebody who's chasing mystical experiences, constantly chasing ceremonies and retreats. I just need a normal ass person who can ground me in real life.
What's up, guys? It's JQ. So when women go online and they complain about men and their dating options, they rarely take any accountability for their own choices in the situation. Meaning, they have information about different men and what they're like, yet they continue to pick men that are going to treat them poorly, and then they go and complain about it. It's a circular system that keeps them stuck, not achieving the results that they want. Here's a great example.
You guys, the spiritual fuckboy, he's likely not your husband.
First off, that should be the most obvious thing in the world. Any sort of fuckboy, specifically a spiritual fuckboy, is definitely not going to be your husband because he's not ready to do so. So what is she even talking about?
The spiritual guy doesn't automatically mean that he's the evolved one. And as I'm growing, I'm realizing.
And I want to elaborate on what she means by that for those of you that aren't as familiar with this concept. So I live in a community where spirituality is important, meaning there are a lot of people here who are interested in doing plant medicines, who are interested in exploring consciousness, and throw around terms like divine masculine, divine feminine, etc. Now, first of all, in these types of communities, which are different towns in Mexico and in Costa Rica and in other places around the world where people like this gather, number one, typically there is often a very favorable ratio of women to men, meaning the dating market is a bit skewed in the favor of men. And then secondly, women are interested in these mystical topics. So any man who learns a little bit about these topics is going to be able to speak in a language that sounds appealing to women. But they should be smarter than this than to be so fooled by the thin veil of a guy learning a few catchphrases and going to a few ayahuasca ceremonies.
I don't need somebody who's chasing mystical experiences, constantly chasing ceremonies and retreats. I just need a normal ass person who can ground me in real life.
Let's evaluate this statement for a moment. So, based on her appearance, clearly she is someone who chases a lot of ceremonies and has pursued a lot of novel experiences. That seems indicative, number one, by what she's saying, and secondly, by her appearance. She has a lot of sort of tribal, mystical, Eastern philosophy tattoos on a significant portion of her body, including her chest, her neck. She also has the septum ring that so many of these girls do. And what she doesn't seem to realize or make the connection with is that these things are signals to men. Women who have this many tattoos and a septum ring, it's a signal that they are likely to be more promiscuous. It can also be indicative that they experienced an assault. If that's the case, that's horrible, and my heart goes out to her. But it still is important that anyone who has been the victim of abuse seeks appropriate treatment in order to heal themselves so that they can make positive choices. By going and getting this many tattoos, that is not appealing to the vast majority of men. So she's already severely limiting the number of men who are going to be interested in her by disfiguring herself to this degree.
Someone who's worked on themselves, of course, and continues to want to work on themselves, but I don't need somebody who's drinking ayahuasca every weekend. Because in my experience, this ego still exists.
And I think that is probably a hypocritical contradiction, because if I had to guess, I would say that this girl has gone through a phase in her life where she was going to ayahuasca ceremonies regularly. You can tell she lives in one of these spiritual communities in a tropical climate, kind of a hippie climate. So it's likely that she's done a lot of that herself.
But instead of it showing up as arrogance or an asshole, it shows up wrapped in some mystical language of the divine masculine. But the actions are the same as a regular fuckboy. And I don't know, the normal one is just obvious. It's less deceiving and less confusing. It feels more dangerous when it comes to it being the spiritual fuckboy.
Well, I personally think the spiritual fuckboy is just as obvious, and I make fun of some of the ladies that I know in the community that I'm in for being so easily deceived by some of these guys. What will often happen is when a new woman enters the community, she will be pursued by a number of the men, And these men will say things like, you are the queen that I've been looking for my entire life. I just feel such a deep connection, and I've been looking for my divine feminine, blah, 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 blah. I think this is just another form of super inauthentic communication. And fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So this girl appears to be, 35 to 40 years old. She ought to know better by now that this type of language and this type of activity is not going to yield a long-term relationship. Yes, men want to get laid, and women need to be smarter than that.
And that's a realization I've been having. So yeah, the spiritual fuckboy, he's likely not your husband. And this is just speaking to my experience. Of course, it exists in all genders, but we're calling out the spiritual fuckboy today.
If she really wants a husband and that was important to her, number one, it would have been a good idea for her to start the search earlier in her life. Secondly, would have been a good idea for her to not get so many tattoos, nose rings, etc., to modify her appearance in that way. That really isn't congruent with with raising your chances of finding a husband. Are there girls that look like this that have a husband? Yes, there are. But she's limiting the pool of men with whom she can connect with to a very small number. So what she's left with would be to develop a great attitude and become supportive and, really lean into helping the man on his mission. So I hope that through this experience, she's able to, distance herself from this type of man, since it's obviously not what she wants. Now, as a guy, being able to speak to women about topics that interest them is going to be attractive to them, likely, so it can be beneficial to learn something about topics that are appealing to women. With that said, I don't advise or condone men speaking inauthentically to women. Do not blow smoke up their ass and, basically use flowery language just to get them into bed. Speak your truth and be authentic, be honest with the women you interact with so that they know what you're up to. Now, the weird paradox is that as a guy, if you're not having as many options with women as you'd like, you do need to incorporate a little bit of fuckboy into your persona, meaning you need to learn some things about the topics that women are interested in and being able to interact with them in a way that's going to appear sexy, but not to this level where you're deceiving them and speaking inauthentically. I don't recommend or condone that. So if you'd like to learn more about how to develop yourself in such a way that women are drawn to you on a regular basis, go ahead and sign up for my email newsletter. There's a link to that in the description below. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you like this video, be sure to check out either of these two. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in the next video.